A single strand of fence wire stopped 40 tanks. That is not a figure of speech. 120 men. On the other side, an entire armored brigade. And between them, a cattle fence. The kind of thin wire any farm boy has climbed through to take a shortcut. It wasn't luck. It was a misreading worked hour by hour until the sun came up. This is against all odds. And this is Longerwala. But before we start, one thing needs to be clear. The Longerwala that became a blockbuster film is different from the one that actually happened. In the movie version, 120 Indians destroy an armored column with rifles and courage. The records tell a better story than that, and a stranger one, but to understand how a cattle fence holds an armored brigade, we need to start with the ground. Because the ground that night was the first soldier in the defense. The Thar desert in Rajasthan is not the rocky scrub and cactus desert you picture when you imagine armored warfare. It is dune country, tall golden sand moved by wind, with thin thorn bushes surviving where they can. And dune sand has one property that changes everything. Off the beaten tracks, it is soft. A man crosses it, a camel crosses it, a light truck with luck crosses it. A 36-ton tank on narrow tracks does not cross it. It sinks, it sloughs, and it digs its own grave. And that created a tactical rule nobody needed to write in a manual. In the Thar, armor that leaves the track stops being armor and becomes a stationary target. A defender doesn't need to block the whole desert. He needs only the few lines of firm ground a tank can actually use. The post at Longerwala sat directly on one of them, a prominent dune 18 kilometers from the border with sandbag bunkers, shallow trenches, and nothing resembling a fort. And running out in front of the position, a single strand of barbed wire. It was not a military obstacle, it was a fence. The border security force kept camels there, and camels wander. Nobody at that moment had any idea what that wire was about to do. Through the evening of the 4th of December, 1971, the BSF camel patrols were where they always were. Forward, in the dark, well beyond the post. And the first warning of the entire battle came from the back of a camel, not from a radar. What the scouts saw is one of the strangest images in modern war. A column. Not a detachment, not a squadron. A column of headlights and dust, roughly 20 kilometers long, moving through the desert toward the Indian border. They spot it, they count it, they call it in. This was the 22nd Cavalry, with the 51st Infantry Brigade. Between 2,000 and 3,000 men, and somewhere between 40 and 45 Chinese-built Type 59 tanks. The plan was ambitious, and on paper, rather good. Cross the desert by night, take Longerwala before dawn, and drive on toward Jaisalmer, threatening the entire Indian rear in the west. And it's worth understanding why anyone would attempt that. The 1971 war was being decided on the other side of the subcontinent in the east, where India was advancing faster than Pakistan could contain. Pakistan needed something in the west, ground, a town, any gain that could function as currency at a negotiating table, and that created the haste, a deep operation run by good troops on a timetable written by people who needed a result rather than by people who had seen the terrain. The problem was hidden inside the plan itself. That column had marched roughly 200 kilometers of desert with no prior reconnaissance of the ground ahead and no coordinated air cover arranged for the following day. No plan survives ground it never visited. The warning reached the post around the middle of the night, and that produced the decision that defines everything after it. Indian Higher Command offered withdrawal. This matters, and it needs saying plainly, because it changes the weight of the choice. This was not a theoretical option. Transport was available. 120 men would have fitted in the vehicles. They could have pulled back to a better line and left the dune behind. The major commanding the post asked to stay. The reasoning was not heroic in the cinematic sense. It was cold. Withdrawing meant crossing open ground at night, with an armored column already moving behind them, and arriving at the next position with no advantage they did not already have here. Staying meant forcing those tanks to attack a dune in the dark, across terrain they had never seen. The radio hisses. The answer goes up. 120 men start digging deeper. Around midnight, the leading tanks came within range of the post. And the most improbable thing of the night happened. They stopped. Here is the heart of this story. The popular version says the Indians laid a brilliant trap, a fake fence, staged to simulate a minefield. The records show something stranger and far more human. Nobody staged anything. The wire was there for the camels. It had been there for months for an entirely mundane reason. But put yourself inside that turret. It is pitch dark. You are 200 kilometers from home, in a desert you have never seen, under orders to take a position before sunrise. And your headlights find, laid across the ground in front of the enemy dune, a line of wire. Wire, to an armor officer, is not a fence. Wire is minefield marking. That is how denied ground is flagged in every army on Earth, and that is how he was trained to read it. Driving into a minefield in darkness, with an entire column nose to tail behind you, is the fastest known method of losing a brigade without ever seeing the enemy. The reading was wrong. It was also the correct reading to make with the information he had. And that created a pause worth more than any weapon the Indians possessed. Pakistani sappers were sent forward in the dark, under fire, to search for and clear mines that did not exist. Hours of darkness, the one resource the attacker could not replace, were spent hunting an imaginary danger. The fear of what might be there holds you longer than the obstacle that is. With the columns stalled and the clock running, the defense went to work. What the 120 had was thin: 2 medium machine guns, mortars, FN FAL rifles, and exactly one weapon capable of killing a tank, a 106mm recoilless rifle mounted on a jeep. One gun, mobile, exposed, with counted ammunition. The tanks that tried to leave the track to envelop the dune found the soft sand and did precisely what physics demands. They bogged, they slewed, they stayed. And the Type 59s carried external fuel drums strapped to the rear, fitted to extend range on that long approach. When one of those drums is hit, it does not explode the way it does in films. It burns. And a tank with its own fuel burning on top of it, in a desert with no ambient light whatsoever, becomes a lantern that betrays every other vehicle around it. And that created the worst possible situation for the attacker. A fight in which every tank that caught fire made things worse for all the others. Fire in absolute desert darkness does not illuminate your route. It advertises. Each burning drum drew, in orange, exactly where the column was, and destroyed the night vision of anyone looking that way. The defenders were watching from outside the light. The attackers were staring into their own glow. The jeep moves, stops, fires, and shifts position before the answer comes, then repeats. All night, against targets their own comrades were lighting. The smell on the dune is burnt diesel and propellant. December cold in the Thar splits the hands of the men reloading. And inside the position, somebody is doing the only arithmetic that matters. How many rounds are left, divided by how many hours until the sun, because the sun was the only thing that could save them. In 1971, the Indian Air Force had no night attack capability in that sector. Nothing was coming before light. Hours to go. And the ammunition was not going to last as long as the night. But it did. And in the first light of the 5th of December, the Hawker hunters arrived. They were 1950s fighters, silver, already elderly. And from above, they found the scenario every ground attack pilot dreams about and almost never receives. Dozens of tanks immobilized, scattered between dunes, with no serious anti-aircraft cover nearby and no friendly fighters overhead at all. What followed is documented without euphemism as a turkey shoot. The hunters dive, they hit, they climb, they turn, they come back. Hour after hour, over a column with nowhere to go and nothing to answer with. And here the legend needs correcting. The popular version says 120 men destroyed an armoured brigade with rifles and courage. The records show something more precise. The 120 did not destroy that column. They did something considerably harder. They held it motionless in the wrong place until the people who could destroy it were able to see. The defense won the night. The Air Force won the morning. No armor protects what is standing still at sunrise. The tally for that day, between 34 and 36 tanks destroyed or abandoned in the field. The Pakistani advance in that sector finished permanently, and on the Indian side, a handful of casualties. A ratio so lopsided that it still appears in armor courses as a case study. And here it is necessary to say the part the film does not. The popular version says the Pakistanis were incompetent. The records show something more uncomfortable. These were professional troops executing with discipline a plan that was already impossible before the first shot. A 200-kilometer night march, unreconnoitered ground ahead, no guaranteed air cover for dawn, and an objective demanding speed precisely where the soil forbade it. The men inside those tanks did not lose through cowardice. They were sent. The defeat belonged to the planning, and it was collected from the people who had not done the planning. Longewala became a memorial, and the tanks are still there, sitting in the sand, rusting beside the dune where they stalled. It also became the temple of Tanomata nearby, where bombs are said to have fallen in the compound and failed to detonate. And I'll give you that for exactly what it is. Documented local folklore, part of the memory of the place, not a technical record. And it became a film, which is simultaneously why you know this battle and why you know it wrong. Real advantage is rarely what you have. It's what the enemy believes you have. If you had commanded that post, 120 men, the trucks waiting, and a 20-kilometer column coming out of the dark, would you have stayed on the dune or used the transport while there was still time? Comment the word wire below so I know you made it to the end. Drop a like, subscribe, and if it makes sense for you, consider becoming a member. It helps me keep bringing these stories. Take care, and I'll see you at the next battle. Stay curious, stay analytical. History is never as settled as it seems.